Hello, viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today, I'm pleased to present yet another installment in my series of Community Spotlight videos, in which I interview various prominent and upstanding members of the Conquest LCG community. Specifically, we discuss their favorite decks, and how best to pilot their favorite warlords. Hopefully, through sharing their myriad personal experience, opinion, and advice, they'll be able to provide you with a host of information useful to both new and veteran players alike. Be sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments section below, and as always, I'm ever open to constructive criticism. But with our introduction aside, let's kick things off with a discussion of Colonel Straken. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, but before you and I get together to reenact some of the more iconic scenes from Predator or Starship Troopers, where might our good viewers at home know you from, or how are you involved in our Conquest community?
Well, I've been an active player and community member in the Netrunner community. I've played Netrunner since it came out, and I've also been a part of the Conquest community. I started playing Conquest at Gen Con. I managed to get my hands on a copy through benefits of a friend of mine. Managed to get myself into the I think it was called the World Eater tournament. So I played then with the one core set. I had a great deal of fun, even though I got my butt whooped. And then so that amazing experience combined with going to Worlds last year, which was the first time I'd gone to Worlds in ever, and it might be the last time for a while.
Sure.
But I got to go to Worlds, and my buddy John came with me, who's also on the Traxis Sector War Cast. And so he and I said, hey, let's do it. Like, Netrunner was filled with all kinds of podcasts. That bandwidth had been filled up with a lot of great podcasts. And I was thinking that I was interested in doing a podcast for Conquest. And
Definitely.
John had met all these guys who had been doing Netrunner podcasts, and he was really excited about it. And I turned to him and I said, let's do a podcast together. And he said, really? We barely know the game. I'm like, yeah, but no one really knows the game yet, right? And so what did we do? I basically said, wouldn't you like to be the guy that people are excited about meeting in person? And he said, wow, that sounds like a good thing, and we have so much to talk about. And at that point, we were just starting to get into reading a lot of the lore.
Right.
So that's where we came in. And so we started the Traxis Sector War Cast. Those first couple episodes were just me and John recording out of a library room. And then Carl came on, because Carl's the lore guy, right? And as any listener to the Traxis Sector War Cast would know,
Right,
he's the lore guy.
Former GW employee.
Yep. And he still works for a store, and he still absorbs so much of that stuff just by osmosis, right? And like he said on the podcast before, he's a sponge for that kind of stuff. It just sticks somewhere. He doesn't know where. It just sticks.
Right.
So yeah, we started doing that, and so we've been doing the Traxis Sector War Cast. We just recorded our 13th episode, and it's been a blast. It has been. I'm the principal editor. So I have the equipment, I take the recording home, and I do all the editing, and I get to take out all the ums and the pauses and the long pauses and the screw ups and everything else. And it's a great deal of fun.
For sure.
And as you know, right? So that's where they know me from. I sometimes post on the boards, but mostly I lurk. I want to let the podcast be the center of attention. And sometimes I engage. The podcast has been the center of attention enough. We got a lot of rules wrong in those early days. So, the Armor Bane area effect one was the one that we're probably the most famous for.
Right.
And then that caused a lot of consternation, because the local players here listened to that, thought that we were right. They didn't see the follow-up corrections to that one particular podcast. I think it was episode 4 or 5. And then So that's caused a lot of consternation amongst folks, but I think that's been corrected from now on.
Well, I've got to say I can definitely relate when it comes to the internet correcting mistakes, as it were, but apart from just the appeal of starting a podcast and becoming a more, involved community member, what was it about this game in particular that really sparked your interest? Like, how does this stand apart from the competition?
um, the moment that I was definitely interested in the game, and I'd seen the announcement on FFG. I'd kind of scanned some of the faction previews, but when they talked about the command struggle, when I read the online rulebook and I read about that command struggle, and the fact that you go to a planet and you win cards and you win resources, that's when the light twitched on. That's
Sure.
when it all clicked, and I said, this is a cool mechanic. This is it's not automatic card draw. It's not card draw by choice. There's some automatic, of course, at the beginning of turns, but you're in control of how much you get, right? Or your opponent is in control of how much you get.
Right,
So that was the moment where I said, this is going to be cool. And then, of course, I played a couple games before those nationals, and because I wasn't convinced I was going to be in that World Leader tournament, but I played a couple games with Nasdrag against other players, and I won my first two games. I mean, it was boom, it was over real quick, right?
Sure.
I bloodied in one match. I bloodied a Warlord on Planet 1, and I killed him on Planet 2. Game was over. I was feeling really good, and as I've told this story before, I then went with Nasdrag with Chaos paired for the Nationals, and I didn't do very well. I lost my first three matches. I went up to Brad Andrews, and I said, what's wrong with me? I'm not winning. I'm playing, and he's like, well, what are you playing with? I'm like, Orcs, and he's like, yeah, Orcs out of a single core set are probably not very strong.
Right.
And I'm like,
right.
well, great to find that out three games into this thing. But then I went on to win my next three games, ended up 3-3, and I had a blast. It was great. And it's a lateral game. Netrunner for so long. I played Netrunner, the original Netrunner back in the 90s.
Okay.
And so I was used to that. And so this was a lateral game. It might sound strange, but it's instead of a vertical one where Netrunner is a vertical-oriented game, you've got servers that you're attacking. This is a lateral game. And that difference allows me to enjoy the differences between both games and enjoy both games fully. And then the lore just starts getting into it, and then you start going nuts, right?
Yeah, as somebody that's, I've got quite the history myself with a few different card games, but do you want to explain just really quick lateral versus vertical for viewers?
Yeah, sure. So the lateral is, we're talking about the planets being outlined across the table, whether it's left to right or right to left, wherever
Sure.
the first planet is. That's what we're talking about here, right? And that lateral orientation forces your mind to think in different ways. These are separate but related worlds, but they're not too related. There's some triggers that you can have Aatrox Prime trigger to the next door world, and so on and so forth. And you have Planum, which moves a warlord, moves a unit over, and then you have, and I'm forgetting the name of the one that triggers everything else, right? Anything else that's in play. So you've got to be thinking in the lateral manner. Karnath. Okay. Karnath, you can trigger anything that's in play, and so that lateral versus a Netrunner, which you have, if you ever played Netrunner, you have three primary servers, and then you have as many remote servers as the corporation player creates, and it's centered on those servers, right? So you're attacking a server, you're influencing a server, you're destroying a server, and it's
Sure.
the board is built vertically across from one player across to the other player, whereas in Conquest the board is a lateral board. These kinds of things mean different types of thinking and different types of gameplay.
Sure.
Right. I can play on Octagon. I can play Netrunner on Octagon, and it's about as close as you can get to a real game. There's obviously missing portions of it. Conquest on Octagon, I'm so bad at Conquest on Octagon. It's insane. It's like I can't. And it goes to the way that our minds process information, in such a way. And I won't go into that. I'm a professor, so I won't go into that kind of stuff. But I can't play. I get my butt kicked on Octagon Conquest, but I managed to, and I know I managed to play and see the relationships between the planets so much better in a live tabletop game than I do on an Octagon game. So that's what appeals to me.
Well, I certainly have nothing but envy for the players that I see posting videos where they actually have playmats out and their actual physical cards in front of them. It's a damn shame that really all I have is Octagon as my go-to means of playing the game. And just to touch on a couple of the things you mentioned before we delve into our Warlord-specific content, I definitely like the fact that the command phase in and of itself is so unique, and it strikes me as very ironic how, in a sense, there's so much in-depth strategy and analysis in this game when tabletop 40k seems very much like a beer and pretzels, let's get together and just roll some dice. So
yeah, exactly. And I've been a gamer for a very long time. And I've always seen the Warlord, the Warhammer guys, and they were Mins and they were RPGs, but I was never an RPG player. I was never. Mins is too expensive, too rich for my blood, too much time. Because with Mins comes painting,
right.
And I'm horrible at that kind of thing. So the chance came to get into the universe, to touch on the universe with this card game that didn't have a lot of other extraneous stuff that I had to do. Podcast set aside, right? Setting aside the whole podcast thing.
Sure.
But it was in the lore, as if you've heard this, if any of your listeners have heard the Traxis Sector War Cast, we love the lore. It's such a rich environment. It's been talked about, and now I have a complete and total understanding of why people are so passionate about this universe. Why are they so enthralled and completely, I don't know, what's the word?
Oh, just enraptured
subsumed
or
by it. Yeah,
enraptured.
Yeah, enamored.
I mean,
of it,
it's definitely an infinitely large universe to draw material from. Some of it is a little absurd, but there's enough of it that's, in my opinion, absolutely fantastic that it keeps me coming back for more and more and more.
Exactly. Yeah, I've restricted myself to some extent to some of the higher quality stuff. As people have online have said, okay, this is a really good set of books, and these aren't so good.
Sure.
So I tend to gravitate towards the good set, and I've had a lot of enjoyment coming from that.
Well, I suppose with all that covered, we might as well just kind of get into Conquest content itself. When I had you on for this interview, I've been doing all these community spotlights kind of centering around a specific warlord and, within the context of their faction as a whole. And my goal has been to get some experienced players, such as yourself. You've been to multiple tournaments, you've been playing this game since, the day it was released at Gen Con. You've been following all the previews from before the game even came out, so you've got this wealth of knowledge, both practical and theoretical, that a more novice player like myself has yet to amass. And I've been having people pick, among a few different warlords what their personal favorites are. And you opted to choose Colonel Straken. So what's the appeal there in particular? Why pick that Astra Militarum warlord?
Well, lore. First and foremost, it's the lore. I started, as I'd mentioned, I started reading some books, and one of the books I've read are the Gaunt's Ghost books by Dan Abnett, and they're Imperial Guard centered, right? Imperial Guard taking on chaos.
Definitely.
And so I played Straken at Worlds when he was still thought to be, when Cato and Kith were the number one, number two. I was like, you know what? I don't like playing Kith. For whatever reason, I just couldn't do it.
Sure.
And then Cato was so well represented, but it didn't really hit with me. So Straken is the guy I played at Worlds, and I placed 30th out of 130, 140 people. One of the funny parts about Worlds, and this will show you how bad I am at Octagon, is I had played it on Octagon. I played against a couple guys, and I had 0-11 record in my last 11 games. I'd won exactly 0.
Bit of a
with Straken.
contrast.
And then, so going into Worlds, I hadn't won a game in 11 games.
Ouch.
And so, but then I got to Worlds, and I beat Kato right out of the gate. And I'm like, all right, well, that was good. I've already turned around my performance, right? And then I went, and then I think I beat Kith second, and then I beat Shadow Sun third. And then maybe I lost, I think I lost to Kato in round 3, but then I beat Shadow Sun, and I beat I beat Kato, Kith, Shadow Sun, and Zerathor. And then I lost to Kith and Kato. The game with Kith was the last one, and my opponent had basically, we went to Planet 6, and my opponent was basically like, that was the best game of Conquest I have ever played. And this guy had played like 200 plus games at this point already. So it was really fun. That's why I chose Straken. Straken is because I had read the books, I was enmeshed in that Imperial Guard lore, or Astra Militarum, however you want to talk about it.
Sure.
But the IG lore was just so strong with me, and I could relate to that. And there were stories that used assault teams that dove out of the sky at the planet, right?
Sure.
From a high release, what is it? A halo release, a high altitude, low opening jump.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So the Elysium assault team was awesome. I know characters who have done this.
Right.
And so that's why I chose Straken. And my buddy John, who I hope you have on, he's going to do either Kotez or Kugoth. So I wanted to let him do those two. Otherwise, I might have picked Kotez, but Straken is a personal favorite of mine. He's not very strong in the competitive scene right now. But he's fun to play. You just throw units at people and just see what they do, right?
Right. Well, I mean, definitely a very identifiable faction in the source material, being the closest thing to normal human beings as there are out there, as superhuman as Colonel Straken's abdominals are. But, why did you stick with Straken? I mean, first off, good on you for trying the warlord that players kind of poo-poo and generally see as less competitive, but why stick with Straken once we saw Kotez come out?
Well, because Kotez was a combo-rific deck, I think.
Sure.
And while I'm a combo guy, I tend to lean that way. That's a little bit further than I've done it. I've tried him, but I still like Straken. Straken is still my personal favorite, and mostly because you get to Kotez. If I've played some games against Kotez lately, because John and I play a lot. So if there's not a unit at the planet, Kotez isn't going there, right? Unless it's
right.
a completely empty planet. But if he doesn't have any units to sacrifice to Kotez to get into some battles, he's not going to go there, right? Unless it's maybe against a rogue trader or a void pirate to cancel the benefit.
Right. He's
Just
not accomplishing really anything in a combat sense, strictly by himself.
Right, and he can't win the combat against the rogue trader. It just goes on forever. Right. So, and then it ends a stalemate, and everybody goes home in those cases. I can't remember that particular thing. So Kotez, to some extent, broadcasts where he's going to go. He limits. There might be 5 planets out there, but if he only has units at 3, he's not going to go to 4 and 5. Right.
Sure.
He's not going to go to that 4th and 5th empty planet. So I like the variability that with all the units that Astra Militarum can throw down, because they have a lot of low-costed units. With all the units they can throw down, I think it opens up the choices on the command struggle, because you really never know where your opponent's going to go. You can guess, you can make some assumptions, but sometimes there's plenty of deploy phases that end. And you're like, where the hell are you going to go?
Sure.
I have no idea. I know where I kind of want to go, but where are you going to go? And so that is, as a player playing Cortez, I'm comfortable with saying, okay, I know you're not going to go here, here, or here because there's nobody there. So that's why I tend to like Straken over Cortez.
Right. Well, I, definitely think dodging restrictions is a good thing, but more than that, just, providing as many unknowns as possible for your opponent, I think is really one of the strengths of the Astra Militarum faction, just because it's, they have so many surprises, like, surprise, 3 of my units gain ranged, surprise, you're killing my unit allows me to put up to 3 copies of another unit from my hand into play.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
this unit unexhausts, and all sorts of different things like that. But apart from just being able to accomplish things by himself, if the situation calls for it, what are some of Colonel Straken's greatest strengths?
Well, he has, like as you said, he has access to a few surprises. Now, they're not a lot of surprises. There's out of hand surprises like suppressive fire that gain ranged. There are Elysium assault teams, and if you pair them with Space Marines, you have access to equal recruits as well.
Right.
But it's the surprise. The strength of it is just numbers of units, right? And if you manage to pair those units with a larger protective unit, like, for example, the Steel Legion Chimera
For sure.
can do a lot of protection, right? Can protect those low-costed units. So if you can manage to get a Steel Legion Chimera out or a Blood Angels from the Space Marines as a paired unit, then you can do a lot of damage. They have Katacon outposts. They have suppressive fire. Suppressive fire, besides maybe the preemptive barrage, which gives the 3 AM units ranged.
Right.
Suppressive fire is the other big card, right? Oh, and if you happen to have his signature support, the Mega Zero command in play, then you have guardsmen coming out every once, wherever you win command struggle, there's a guardsman, and those guardsmen are great to just suppressive fire. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm gonna tap your big AE3 guy or your AE2 or your big hitter, and then I'm going to give my guys ranged, and that big hitter's going to go down before you even have a chance to realize what's happening. So those are the greatest strengths. And I think it's really in the ranged. If you pair the ranged with Katacon, and like I said, I'm a combo player, so you got to pair some of these things, and so that really helps to make Straken pretty well a threat. I'm not sure why he isn't tier 1. It's probably because he doesn't have access, and I thought about this while we were getting ready for this. He probably doesn't have access to really well-costed, larger units. Steel Legion Chimera is not bad, but it's a 3, so you can't bring it in with staging ground.
Sure.
So he doesn't have access to a lot of those units. So that might be his biggest weakness.
Sure. Well, I mean, as can be said with almost any card in the game, it definitely remains to be seen where the developers take, our expansion material, just because eventually I'd like to see each and every warlord be raised to the point where they're competitive. I think it would be a bit of a shame if this game goes in the direction of kind of forgetting about some of our older warlords. I would just like to see everything brought up to a relatively equal level power-wise. So if, Straken would stand to benefit from having some later game units to, complement and supplement that early game cheap myriad unit synergy, I think that would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm having seen Netrunner and Game of Thrones go, develop as they have. I think your dream is a good one and shared by all, of having everybody be, equally strong. But it's not going to happen, unfortunately, because some warlords, and Straken is maybe amongst those folks. Yes, they're going to release more soldiers and more warriors are going to come around.
Right.
And so you're going to have more options. but are those options aren't necessarily going to be better. They're just going to be different.
Right.
So Netrunner designers have done a good job of correcting for the meta, and so I think we're getting to the stage. Brad Andrews has gone on record as saying before they released the core, they had everything designed up to and through Tyranids. So in the next, with the Planetfall cycle and with the big box after that, which I would assume would include Necrons, would be a Necron-centric deluxe, and then not necessarily the Planetfall cycle, but the cycle after the Necrons. That's where you're going to see cards that I would hope are designed to respond to the meta, to what people are playing, the power stuff.
Definitely.
Stuff like Crushing Blow might be kind of a response to the meta. Like you have a card that delivers unpreventable damage. So some of that unpreventable stuff to get around Armor Bane. There's still plenty of out there, but maybe make it a little bit more accessible to all 7 factions instead of maybe Space Marines or Astra Militarum can handle it a little bit with bodyguards and chimeras and stuff like that.
Most definitely.
But,
and I think it's probably most likely that some of our earlier, maybe underpowered warlords are probably just going to be forgotten about. Most of my previous experiences with the Lord of the Rings living card game, and in that game, the heroes, which are the versions of warlord units for that game, they basically just get alternative versions where they still count as the same character, but you have different options for which form you'd like to use. And as open as I personally would be to warlords receiving errata and hopefully reprints with the, upgraded version, I also think that's kind of unlikely. So,
yeah,
a lot of people criticize Straken for being like a poor man's version of Zerathur, but I suppose it all just ultimately remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, but I've seen those discussions, and those are good points. However, the difference between Zerathur and Straken is Straken can throw so many more low-costed units at you.
Sure.
Than Zerathur can.
Right.
You have it like my buddy John, the other one of the other third of the Traxis Sector War Cast. Right. He threw a Cortez deck together that he did 21 damage ranged once, right?
Sure.
Zerathur can't do that. Zerathur can't pull that off, right? The only reason I won is because I had 9 orc units that were most of them which were brutal already, and I just had massive hit points on the table. I had 9 units with big hit points, and that's the only reason I won with the Elysium Assault team, and a staging ground won me that game, right? Astra Militarum can send bodies, and we've talked about that on our podcast. People have talked about it online. So I think Straken is kind of a deck design thing.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of it's
35 units.
I think a lot of it's completely dependent on context. I mean, say one card that would be absolutely broken in, say, Space Marines, if it exists in orcs, then it's never going to be an issue. So. Oh
yeah. And the designers, you've heard Brad say this. He makes signature cards for a reason, and he makes loyal cards for very specific reasons as well.
Definitely.
He doesn't need to have Kith having access to event canceling stuff, right?
Sure. Well, just kind of reeling things in ever so slightly.
Sure.
Oh, no problem. But Colonel Straken, as he is within the Astra Militarum faction, seeing as how they can fill the tabletop with, myriad bodies, endless guardsman tokens, do you feel that there are any matchups where he really excels, where maybe he has his absolute best chance?
I think he plays well against Shadow Sun, anything that relies on a little bit bigger units.
Okay.
So Eldar, Shadow Sun, Eldar units, like he could very well excel against Eldaroth, I've had success against Shadow Sun, but who hasn't, right?
Sure.
Anything with area effect is his bane. So those that have access to a lot of area effect stuff can be hurtful.
Sure.
But he has some, and when he has the chance to throw all the units at the table versus your 2 or 3 or 4 units, that's when he excels. And so I think that speaks to orcs to some extent. But my previous game aside, I think he has good chances against orcs. He has good chance against. I don't know if Chaos is really one. With Chaos with Warp Storm would be detrimental. But Eldar, maybe Tau. Oh, he's especially good against Anshi. Because Anshi and his units leave. Yeah, they hit and then leave, right?
Right.
Well, Colonel Straken's command squad is the signature squad. If they go, a guardsman comes in. So yeah, if that's the last unit at the planet and Anshi hits and goes and kills the guardsman,
sure, you win
the command
by
squad,
default.
then the guardsman comes into play, and the single guardsman has won me the planet a couple of times.
Sure.
Yeah, that one little guy is like, I'm still here.
Sure,
I'm still
sure.
here. I'm going to plant my flag.
Right. And I mean, just by the merit of being able to leverage that power of numbers, although you're susceptible to any number of, multi-target types of damage, a Black Legion Helldrake doesn't do much. Well, it doesn't kill any more guardsman tokens than it would, an Honored Librarian or some much more expensive unit, so...
Right, exactly.
Just abusing the actual mechanics of combat to incur as little damage distributed amongst, a lot of different units as possible is definitely very strong. And
Right.
It definitely seems like our current meta kind of rewards players for getting a lot of units out there pretty quickly.
Yeah, and if there's one thing I think Astra Militarum needs is a little bit more surprise to deploy units. Yes, you have the Elysium Assault Squad. Yes, you have Staging Grounds. But Staging Grounds can be used once, right? And you have to get it and you have to play it.
Right.
So it's to some extent telegraphing your move. And then you have to build around Staging Ground. Staging Ground has that 2 cost limit for a unit to put in to be played, right? To be deployed.
Sure.
So...
Well,
there's some limits. I'd like to see some little cost reduction somewhere in there.
And similarly, the Inquisitorial Fortress functionally acts as an Archon's Terror, but there's that delay component, the same with Staging Ground, where even though you can surprise your opponent, they understand that it's coming. It's, predictable, something that they can anticipate.
Yeah, and they can plan for it, right? Yeah,
exactly.
They can plan for it. But that card. I don't know if Catacan or the Inquisitorial Fortress scare me more when I'm playing against another an AM opponent. I don't know which one scares me more, the Catacan or the Inquisitorial Fortress. Probably the Fortress, because for 2 costs you can just route the big bad, right?
Sure.
Boom, there you go, you're gone. Combat action, right? So that makes for fun times. Like if whenever you can, and we say it in Netrunner a lot, and I don't know that it's been said too much amongst at least the Conquest community that I'm a part of, but putting your opponent between a rock and a hard place, to give them an ambiguous decision,
right,
is what you want to do. The more you can do that, the more you have advantage over them. Right, and the more likely it is that they're going to make a mistake.
Sure.
So put them in those hard spots, in those ambiguous decisions, and I don't know where I'm going to go, and so then you have the advantage.
Right. I always like to think of it as giving your opponent as many opportunities to make a mistake as possible.
Absolutely.
Present them with a lot of unpleasant options and hope that they, at some point, pick the one that works out best for you in the end.
Right.
So, which of our 2 factions do you normally pick for ally? You've got the Orcs and you've got the Space Marines. They each have their unique appeal, but which is your preference?
Well, I think before Staging Ground came out, I was leaning to Space Marines, right? Because you have the Blood Angels, that can sit there and just be a threat and absorb a damage every once in a while. They have to attack with more than 1 point, right?
Right.
So the Blood Angels, the Eagle Recruits, those are soldiers. The Tactical Squad Cardenas is a soldier that gives area effect. So those are good. But with Staging Ground, I've started to lean, and frankly, Staging Ground and Snakebite Thug are two huge cards that I think make Orc a stronger pairing for Astra Militarum, because there are so many warriors amongst the common Orc units.
Sure.
They can almost go exclusively Soldier Warrior in your units, with the exception of things like Steel Legion Chimera for support, right, to protect those guys.
Right.
Now, Steel Legion Chimera, if you've played on Octagon, and you've played probably enough to know that Steel Legion Chimera is the first targeted, because they're not going to waste their time trying to ping off others when one damage is being absorbed.
Definitely.
So they're gonna go for that. They're gonna center their attacks, maybe their first 2 or 3 attacks, on the Chimera. Well, meanwhile, you're hitting them with soldiers and warriors. Bam, 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 right?
Right.
Goth Boys, right? The 1 cost +3 when it first planet with Staging Ground,
which
is
itself
also
is a warrior.
Yes, which is a warrior itself. So now you have Straken there. Maybe he has a couple units with him, and they attack, and you're good. And then before your first attack, you pop the Goth Boys down, and you attack for 4. I mean, that's a surprise. So, you can't always count on these things to happen, because we have 3-card limits in these games, right?
Sure.
So, but you can play some stuff, and even just playing a command squad out there, having them hit for 3, and yes, they'll go away, and then a guardsman comes in and hits for 2. I think part of like with every warlord, protecting Straken, because I think he only has 6 hit points.
Right.
Protecting Straken is very important, and that's where maybe where his weakness lies, because 6 points is fairly easy to do to a warlord, right? If you just center your attacks on that. So
I believe in the second of a grand total of 2 different Octagon gameplay videos I've published at the moment, the second one happens to star a Colonel Straken that I believe gets bloodied against an enraged orc on the very first turn. So that moment's forever immortalized.
Yeah. So, and having an enraged orc on the other side of the table as the only unit, you're like, oh no, right. I think I'm to die. But again, the enraged orc can only attack 1 time, right?
Sure.
So if you manage to hit him for 5 before he can swing a second time, you're probably fine.
Exactly.
But, those are corner case situations.
Sure. Well, I suppose we've mentioned area effect, warp storm, different things like that splash damage or do area effect. Anything that can target multiple abilities at once is going to really hurt the guard player, if not serve as the bane of their existence. Do you feel that Colonel Straken has any other weaknesses or vulnerabilities?
Well, we mentioned the 6 hit points. I think that's a vulnerability. He doesn't have, there's some 2 shield cards, 2 shield event cards. Mm-hmm. But unlike Chaos's 2 shield events or Tau's 2 shield events, to arms, I don't know if to arms requires a support to be in play, to be of any use. So it's not a good first turn. It's not necessarily a good first turn card. It can be a hell of a surprise if you have a support, but he's lacking in the 2 shield events that don't combo with something else. Right. So the value of the card in and of itself, without anything else, I think those 2 shield events, there need to be more of them. One of the questions that we'll talk about, one of the things we'll talk about is how do you use his signature stuff, right?
Right.
And I use his signature attachment is almost always used for the 3 shields. Right. Drawing the cards when the unit goes out of play is not bad, but because his low hit points, because people tend to target the Warlord, but target Straken in a combat, the 3 shields is more valuable than the attachment's effects. So, that's kind of where I'm going with that.
Sure.
He's got some weaknesses and vulnerabilities, but if he can find, and that's when I'm deck building, that I'm like, okay, 2 shield events. I'm like, I got nothing.
Right.
It's just this, I don't tend to play with a lot of supports, but to arms needs a lot of supports. You need to have supports that you want in play. And unfortunately, one of the best supports, the Inquisitorial Fortress, you can't untap, you can't ready it.
Right.
Because once it's been exhausted, it goes away. So, Catachan, it's been used on Catachan before. That's fine. It's been used on Staging Ground before. That's fine. But again, it's not quite powerful enough yet. Still requires the supports to be in play.
Well, are there any specific matchups, any, Warlords, factions, even specific cards that really just, make you do that dread, feared, gulp, where it's going to be an uphill struggle either from the start or as soon as a certain card hits the table?
If a Shrine of Warpflame, the signature support for Chaos, comes into play, I'm hating it. If the Cato's Stronghold, the signature support for Cato, that comes into play, I'm hating it. Right, those 2 cards, because you have units leaving all the time. Right, anything that triggers off a unit going away is not good. So Cato is a bad matchup for AM.
Sure.
Right, because he just gets resources with every little thing that goes away.
Right.
So those are the 2 cards that I see come out. He's not particularly good against Shadow Sun. Can pose problems. Shadow Sun can pose problems with some of the attachments that they have. The deflector shield, the reflector shield, I think.
The repulsor impact field.
Repulsor, that's the one.
Which deals out damage to each and every unit that actually hits a big, beefier unit.
Yeah, and the elite squadron, the ones that take damage in lieu of someone else taking damage.
Right.
Right. Now, those are all reactions. Some of those cards are reactions, and I've learned in the last probably 2 weeks that we talked about your opponents making mistakes. Those reactions, I don't have to. If I'm in a very competitive environment, I would never do this at a store championship. I would never do it at a casual championship. I always point out what they can do better.
Sure.
But if you're in a regionals, if you're in a nationals, if you're in worlds, if you're in one of those high potency, high stakes, I guess, as high stakes as these games get, I'm not going to point out that you have to that your reaction could be, oh, you get your resource with Cato.
Sure.
I'm not going to point that out. That's your job to know, right?
Sure.
So some of those reactions, I've learned that I need to be very, very aware of when reactions are triggered, and when I'm responsible for them. That's a big deal.
Right.
But besides those signature units and maybe the elite. I don't know if there's anything. Maybe when what's the area effect? The chaos guy. Name's escaping me right now.
The area effect. Bloodletter.
Yep, that's the one. When the vicious bloodletter hit the table, I'm like, oh no.
That's when you hope you've got your suppressive fire.
Exactly. So, and one of the things that I think one of the reasons, and this is going to sound weird, I think one of the reasons I did so well at Worlds is because I only had 2 core sets. I wasn't convinced at that point that 3 core sets were needed, and I wanted to see what I could do with 2. And so it forced me into some deck building choices that forced variety in my units. I couldn't play with 3 Catacons. I had to play with 2. So I was forcing myself to play, I think, with a slightly larger curve than I would have with 3, that I do with 3. And maybe that helped me. Maybe that helped.
Well, it's certainly possible. And I suppose the more, tournament and competitive players always strive for consistency, but maybe seeing as how Colonel Straken isn't necessarily the most competitive warlord purely based on like win percentage, having the added versatility so that you can just kind of answer any and all comers could definitely potentially help, since we don't see, one necessarily ultra refined strategy yet with the Astra Militarum.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we for anybody entering, one core is good. Two cores really opens up the deck building possibilities. And then the migration to three core sets is a personal choice. But I think anybody who really wants to have a lot of deck building choices, that second core can really open up some things. So yeah.
Sure.
And I like being able to respond to all cases, right? You like to have a little area effect. You like to have a little of this. You like to have a little of that. The Gorzod, the Orc Warlord, just got spoiled. People have been going gaga over him. Like, look at, we get Astra Militarum units for one less, and people are, rightfully so, excited about it. I'm excited about it. But that's an orc unit, right? He's an orc warlord. He's not an Astra Militarum guy. Astra Militarum for me is really about the lore. I get to build a deck and really imagine in my head this happening. Built for fun, built for combat, not necessarily built to win. But again, more like with Shadow Sun, more attachments will come. Like in Astra Militarum's case, in Straken's case, more soldiers and warriors will come.
Definitely.
And you'll just have more choices, and maybe one of them involves planetfall. Is in planetfall, and it opens up some real possibilities for Straken. So,
Sure. Well, I mean, seeing as how there's been a very small delay, I'm not sure if you've noticed, between, say, even just starting my YouTube channel and the release of the Great Devourer Deluxe expansion. I think it's going on something like 3 months since our last war pack. Seeing as how it might be a little while before we really get into the planetfall cycle, given our current meta, our current card pool, what's kind of your basic strategy throughout the game? How do you deploy your command units to what are some of your favorite combat inclusions?
Sanctioned Psyker. Sanctioned Psyker is a big one.
Sure.
The two command, because and we've covered this in the Warcast a little bit in our How Do You Beat 'Em segment, where if you're playing against Kato, you're never going to deprive him of resources,
right?
Because people die, so you got to deprive him of cards. Straken, you need to get cards. You don't necessarily care about resources because you have so many low-costed units.
Right.
So resources are a bonus, but cards are where he's going to shine because you need so many combinations. You need those supports out. You need the supports out and the cards in hand to combo with the supports.
Sure.
So drawing those cards is where I put my strategy with Straken. Make sure I draw cards maybe to the detriment of getting resources. Sanction Psyker is 2, but the Mystic Warden is 0. Mystic Warden goes away, but he's 0, and he doesn't, Straken doesn't turn him on. He's a Psyker, but he's still so many of those low-cost units work. And so my strategy with Straken, not from a deck building standpoint, but from a play standpoint, is get the cards almost to the detriment of the resources. And then plan out, really, really notice, because he has the range, because ranged is a capability, a very likely capability, you want to get a double shot in and really pay attention to the initiative. When you have initiative, that's when you got to give you guys ranged. Man alive. Because if you get 3 or 4 shots in before they get there first, that can be a real game changer. So notice the initiative, make sure and give you guys range to get that double up. And range can be defensive. You can use it when you don't have initiative. I think, I'm not sure, but I think you try to stretch out the game. So, if it's a 3-planet win, then you try to win one of those, of course, right? But let's say it's a 4-planet win. Winning one of those planets that leads to the 4-planet win is critical, because I think a longer game will benefit Straken, because you can just keep throwing units. As long as you got the card draw, as long as you got the card, you're drawing those cards, I think that mechanic will work. But I've only come to that realization in the last month or so, and I haven't had a chance to really try it out yet.
And I could maybe see, wanting to optimize just the number, maybe like the chance of your combo pieces all coming together. Mm-hmm. Like the longer a game, the more likely you are to have some opportunity to preemptive barrage your opponent into absolute oblivion during some decisive battle. I suppose, what are some of just your favorite units for combat when it comes to, Straken? The Steel Legion Chimera seems almost invaluable, but what are some of your other staples?
Well, as I mentioned before, Goth Boys, Snakebite Thug is a big one, but he's a big one in anything he can be paired with, right?
Definitely.
He's a great unit. So Sanction Psychers, Goth Boys, Sanction Psychers for the command struggle, Goth Boys for the first planet challenge, if not win. I like Snakebite Thug. Of course, his signature squad is good, although that's an automatic include, so you have no choices there.
Sure.
What else? Steel Legion Chimera you mentioned. I'm not sure about the Valkyrie. That's still a 4-cost. That's a high-cost unit, right? You don't get a chance to play 4-cost units very much.
Right.
I don't, because of my strategy of trying to draw cards. So, yeah, what's the little ranged guy, the 1/1?
Just
Scout,
a Rattling Deadeye?
Human. Yeah, Rattling Deadeye. That's the one. So he's a 3 of, because you love to have him. He's got ranged, and if all you need is one Catachan, that's a 3 hit point. That's a 3 attack right out of the gate.
Sure.
So that's a good one too.
Well, I know a little earlier you mentioned something about having, an elite type unit that would really, maybe change the game for the AM player. If you don't like the Assault Valkyrie, I assume you're not a big fan of the Lehman Russ battle tank. What kind of elite do you think might make, the difference? What might encourage you to actually give it a shot?
Well, the Lehman Russ isn't bad, but again, a 5-cost unit in a Straken deck is problematic. The Shrieking Basilisk is one that John has played with before, and it's forced me into making some odd decisions, right? Because I don't want to exhaust I'm prematurely exhausting my support, so that when the Basilisk, who has ranged, makes an attack. So the Basilisk is one, even though the Lehman Russ, I have one Lehman Russ in my deck, but I've also really considered the Shrieking Basilisk only because of the range and his secondary effect. But I can't bring myself to play a 6-cost is rough.
Sure.
So I also, and maybe as we're talking, I'm realizing that maybe I should include some rogue traders, right? Not necessarily the Void Pirates for the card draw, but the rogue traders for the money. And then promotions. Promotions are always good. Almost never a bad thing to include 2. I very rarely include 3 unless I feel I really need to get it.
Right.
But the elite units, yeah, the Lehman Russ is probably the one I would go with over the Shrieking Basilisk at this point. So.
Well, I suppose we've, kind of touched on a breadth of different topics throughout the course of this video so far, but what are some of your just absolute favorite plays or combos? If things align, if things are going well, what are just some of your favorite combinations to see on the tabletop?
If I have 2 Catachan outposts and I have 3 or 4 units at let's say 2 or 3 units at a planet, and then my Warlord goes there and Straken goes there. I love having suppressive fire. That's not preemptive barrage.
Sure.
Giving everybody range. I'm going to hit you for big. You're going to get to attack me, yes, but I'm going to hit you for big first.
Right. And essentially clear out some of the biggest problems.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. It's still a question in my mind about whether I clear out the 2/2 or the 2/3. You know, do I clear out? Do you clear out 2 2/3s, or do you clear out a 4/5 or a 4/4 with the range stuff, right? Because they're going to get one attack.
Sure.
So I'm thinking I clear out the 2/3s and allow him one attack versus clearing out the 4/4 and allowing him 2. So, and then it all changes, of course, when they start playing shields on everything.
Right.
But if I have 2 Katacons out and I have a preemptive barrage in my hand, I'm feeling pretty good. You know, that's probably my happy place.
Definitely. I suppose, considering in particular that you're a player that's actually been an active tournament participant and seen, you said you went to Worlds. Definitely not a lot of people can say that. Do you have any really memorable games? Whether, you've excelled or done not quite so good, anything really stand out in your memory?
Well, there's 2 games. The one I played Shadow Sun, and I had won the first 2 planets, and the third was going to be my win condition. So we're in the deploy phase of this game, and I'm winning command at 4 of the 5 planets, and he has 1 or 2 resources left. He plays an Eldar survivalist on the empty planet, and so he's going to win that. He's going to win 2 cards and 2 resources, and so then I play a rogue trader, so it's a push, and then I play. And then he passes, and I play a promotion on my rogue trader, and he throws down his cards and he says, "Okay, I concede. I'm done." and so I had won that game by concession before the end of the deploy phase on turn 3. So that was a fun one, considering that I had gone in. Remember, I went into this tournament 0-11.
Right. Certainly
so
a welcome change.
That was my second or third game, and so now I'm at. I think that was my second game, so I went to 2-1, and I was like, "Well, that's a heck of a thing." Usually, I'm the one doing the concession.
Definitely.
So that was fun. But then the other game that I mentioned earlier against the Kith player, this was round 6. The way it shaped up, I was 4-1 going into it. He was 4-1, and we were going to come away. The winner of that was going to make top 16. We were pretty sure. And this guy, like I said, he'd logged over 200 games. I had only played, at that point, I had only played about 35 games. And I mean, I could count. I could say, okay, I was 0-11, and before that, I played this many games. So right. I was very aware of how many games I'd played. He played over 200. He was playing with 3 core sets with Kith, which was, if you saw those top 16, I think 9 of them were Kith in the cut.
It's safe to say the odds were against you.
Oh, yeah. The odds were against me completely. And I had him sweating. We went to planet 6, and it was he managed to bloody my Warlord, send Straken back, and then it was all academic from there. But it was, he got up, and he shook my hand. He said, "That was the best game of Conquest I've ever played." I was in the heat of battle, right? This is right after the game. He was happy he'd won. I was still absorbing the loss. So for the next couple minutes, I was, like, I was a little hard. But he was so happy. His friends were around him. He was getting high fives. He was hugging his significant other. He was really, really happy to have won that game. And I was happy to have been a part of that experience for him. And so that will stick with me. I think he ended up going to top 8. Funny enough, one of the gentlemen that I beat, not the Tau player, but one of the other gentlemen that I beat, actually ended up making top 8. He
Wow.
made the cut based on my strength of schedule because I had done so well. His strength of schedule was really strong too, and he was 4-2, and I had a higher strength of schedule than I did, so he got into the top 16. But that one game against the Kith player, he was so happy, he was so enthralled, and I presented him a challenge playing Straken with 2 core sets against Kith with 3. So that's a feather in my cap. Doesn't get me anything, that and a couple bucks will get me a cup of coffee, but it's a pleasant memory.
Definitely, and it makes for a fantastic story, so
Yes,
I appreciate your sharing that with myself, with all the viewership. I suppose just on that note, any advice, any thoughts for somebody that's really wanting to give Straken a try but is maybe intimidated just by, people all over the forums kind of looking down on Straken, maybe dismissing him out of hand?
The people in the forums are not there when you're playing the game, right? You're playing the person in front of you.
Sure.
You're playing the opponent on the other side of the table. You're playing their deck, their cards. If you want to play with Straken, right? Have fun. I have 2 younger children. I always tell them it's more important to have fun than to win. And while winning makes it more fun, right, then it's not the only thing. And so have fun with it. Try them out. Odds are that if you've had experiences like I have, that you will find a way to win games. You will surprise yourself. You might not win the premier tournaments,
Definitely.
but you will find a way to win games and have fun and satisfy whatever thematic or lore-based. If you're like me, you love the IG lore, the Astra Militarum lore, and you can have that experience. Don't, the forums are the forums. They're there. They provide some great advice. They can fine tune things. But in the end, you're playing your game against the guy against the guy or gal on the other side of the table, or so you need to focus on what you want to do to have fun.
Sure.
My most miserable experiences have been when I'm trying to play a deck that I don't necessarily like, but is powerful. In other words, when I'm trying to play Kith.
Definitely.
I don't necessarily, whatever it is, I just don't like it. And so when I lose with Kith, it's a bitter loss, right? It sucks.
Sure.
Because I took nothing. I'm playing with one of the best Warlords, and I just lost. There's nothing. I just had a miserable experience playing the game because I'm not playing a Warlord I like.
Right.
Play the Warlords you like. Right? That's my tip. That's my tip.
I could definitely stand to benefit from that myself. I'm the kind of person where if I'm playing, say, an RPG video game, maybe there are some fun abilities that I'd like to try out, but I can't help but build spreadsheets and analyze everything to death so that if I, God forbid, I make a suboptimal choice, the world will come to an end or something like that. Yeah. I think at the very least, seeing as how quickly our meta can potentially shift in this game, the broader your base of experience is, the better. Just in having, a different guest on each and every episode of this series, it's getting as many opinions, as many perspectives as possible. So playing more Warlords, trying more decks, it's all information. It all stands to make people a better player. So I very much appreciate your, perspective on Straken here. So whether or not he happens to be the Warlord of choice for whomever's watching this video, I definitely think we can benefit from giving him a closer assessment. So
absolutely. And the Broderick Warlord is going to come out, and there's going to be some Astra Militarum cards coming out that are hopefully going to be very exciting and hopefully help, if not improve Straken's potential for tier 1, what's called tier 1, then at least improve his potential to be even more thematic deck.
Definitely.
So.
Well, I very much appreciate your coming on, so I suppose any final thoughts before I bring this video to a close?
No, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you. And for your viewers, keep on keeping on. Keep on playing the game. And those Tyranids will hit eventually. They'll hit eventually.
Eventually, but
And and if you're like Mitch, who apparently Mitch, you don't have a lot of live bodies to play with.
that is true.
I think what'll happen. We've been talking about it here. Is people are wait. So there's this share of the potential conquest players community who's just waiting for Tyranids.
Sure.
And as soon as they come, like Tyranids will be coming out the walls, right? Coming out, not only with the current player base, but it's going to turn on a whole lot of other players. So get to your game stores, talk about it. Make sure people know that you want to play Conquest, and make sure your stores know that you want to play Conquest, and the community will grow. The community will grow. So.
Sage advice yet again. So I suppose before I wrap things up, why don't you plug your podcast and yourself one last time, and we'll end it there.
Well, I'm Tobin Lopes of the Traxis Sector War Cast. It's a podcast about Warhammer 40k Conquest. We tend to focus on the lore of the game and our love of playing the game. So we've got 13 episodes in the can, and we'll be adding videos. As Mitch knows, we'll be adding some gameplay videos here in the near future, as well as doing some fanboy videos coming from the Gen Con. So that'll be fun. You can find us on Team Covenant. We are one of the blogs on Team Covenant. We're hosted there. And you can also find us on Facebook and on Twitter at Traxis Sector WC.
Fantastic.
So, thanks.
And I'll be sure to include links in the description for this video. So thank you once again for your time, Tobin, and take care.
Thanks, Mitch.
Well, now that our interview has come to a close, I'll just end this video by saying thank you once again for watching. Be sure to leave a comment sharing your own thoughts, opinions, perspective, and experience when it comes to Colonel Straken and the Astra Militarum faction as a whole. Interaction with viewers like yourself is the absolute highlight of creating content for this channel, so I implore you to please take a moment to let me know what you thought of this interview and which warlord you'd like to see next. If you happen to know someone that would make a particularly good candidate to star in one of these future videos, please feel free to share. But with that said, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you have not done so already. Feel free to get in touch with me or contact me directly through all the social media outlets if you'd like. But in any case, thank you very much for watching, and be sure to check back again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content yet to come.